Well, hello again, friends, and good morning to you. Richard Clinton here for another Fire Pit Conversation. It's good to be back. Good to be able to talk with you all again and be able to just share some more thoughts that are going on in my head that I feel like God's kind of throwing into my mind again this week, and just being able to just offer a little bit more encouragement and just a little bit more um, uh, thoughts from my faith and my journey and things that are going on. So, friends, I pray that you're all doing well, that this has been a good week for you. Um, Seems like we're seeing a little bit more, some good things happening in around in Georgia, at least, where we're seeing things starting to open again, and life starting to return in some capacity. So, which is a good thing. Uh, and I look forward to that happening more and more as we move forward. So, well, again, and I pray that everyone's doing well. This is another beautiful morning. It's been an unusually cool week, which has been actually kind of nice, being mid-May and um, the mornings being as cool as they are. And now we're warming up again today, so we're actually starting in the 60s or upper 50s today, which is a little bit warmer than it's been the last several days. So spring's actually returning, maybe feeling a little bit more like summer next week. So we'll see how that goes. Um, so anyway, yeah, there's been a ton of things that have just been rattling in my mind. And as I was sitting there processing this morning and sitting in my chair in my living room, just kind of thinking through, what, uh, and asking God, what is it that I'm supposed to share this week? Um, and then I'm sitting out here, coming out to the fire pit, and just kind of processing a little bit more, and it just continues to take me back into the kind of the thoughts I've been catching this week, if you will. It's been wild because, and I think I've mentioned this in the last couple episodes, that um, there's been a lot of churning. I started a writing project last year that really, got put on hold for a while, but has really kind of really taken off the last few weeks. And I set no expectations on that. I'll let that take as long as it needs to. But hammering out a full chapter this week in this project was very good, and the whole concept and idea of choosing healing and choosing restoration, choosing to be restored, and choosing the healing power of Jesus in our lives is something that's so important for each one of us. Um, but as I process through it, it's something that often at times I think it's so overlooked in our lives. It's so overlooked, and um, it's so overlooked in the church in some capacity. Oftentimes we see where um, you come to the point of salvation, and um, at that point, that it seems like you're almost left to your own devices at that point, and there's not much more that happens within you. You're kind of left to kind of figure things out. And what is an important aspect of this is this idea, and this is the importance of being um, of seeking and receiving the healing of Jesus. You know, because we come to, and we can receive, and we can come to salvation. We can profess our faith and choose to follow Jesus, and all those wonderful things that we have to do, that are needed, that we must do to come to the end of ourselves, right? But at the same time, if we stop there, then we are missing a whole heck of a lot of what Jesus came to offer: the healing of the broken, to bring sight to the blind, and all those. This is all about restoration, continued restoration that's supposed to happen over the course of our lives. You know, and that's a topic and a category that's really resonated in me and in my heart and my journey over the last few years, um, since really coming to faith at the beginning of 2015, and really surrendering. I'd spent the last probably 3 years prior to that just searching, just trying to figure out some answers as to what God is up to, who really is Jesus. What is this narrative? Even spent 2 years straight just reading through the Bible, just reading through it. And then, when I finally came to that place of surrender, come to that point of really choosing to respond to Jesus with my yes and say, I will follow, I will trust you. Um, I knew and knew deep inside that there had to be more, right? It couldn't have stopped there. And what I'm thankful to have learned and thankful to have had a category in my life is the whole idea of frontier, of choosing frontier, of being able to know that, as Howard Macy says, the spiritual life cannot be made suburban, that it is always frontier. There's always so much more unknown that we have to be after, that God is after in each one of us, right? After restoring. And that's what Jesus came to really bring out in us. And it begins with our identity. It begins with receiving the identity of who we are, receiving the identity as sons, as daughters. I guess as Paul wrote in Ephesians 1:5, that he predestined to us for adoption as sons through Jesus Christ, according to his kind will and intention, and according to his purposes. That was his intention all along, is to restore the identity that he had bestowed upon us in the very beginning, right? And friends, and I just want to really reiterate that idea and that thought that coming to that point, receiving the identity, is just the starting point. Salvation and surrender is just the starting point. You have to go deeper. There has to be more happening. This is part of the reason why we name this ministry Deep Roots Ministries, right? It's this understanding that there is always the process of becoming more, of growing deeper roots. And as Paul wrote in Colossians 2, he writes to let your roots grow down into him and let your lives be built on him, and then your faith will grow strong in the truth you were taught, and you will overflow with thankfulness. A bug crawling on my book there. So it's all about letting the roots grow deeper. And you think of a tree, and there's a tree. We have a couple trees we're planting. We're about to put a new one in my front yard. And the first one I planted 4 years ago, and it was a challenge that was issued before I went to, went on a trip to Colorado to what's called the Become Good Soil Intensive. And we were asked, to plant a tree ahead of coming. One of the things we'd like you to do is plant a new tree. It doesn't matter where it is, whether it's in your yard or helping a friend plant a tree, or just do that. Get in the soil and be willing to do that. And so the whole process of just tilling the soil and messing with that and getting the roots ready and planting that tree into the ground was a good process. So 4 years ago, we planted this red maple. Then it was right around the time my oldest son, Sean, was graduating high school. So it became a kind of a cool tradition that we decided to start that when our kids graduate, we'd plant a tree and kind of remembering when they graduated and just watching that tree blossom and kind of that picture of our kids now stepping out on their own and growing their own roots and growing their own lives, right? And then when Brandon graduated in 2018, we planted a tree for him that is continuing to grow. And then now that my youngest is graduating high school, we will be planting a tree for her very soon as well. But I'm sitting here and it's behind the camera, so you can't see it, but there's this red maple that's right in front of my house that we planted 4 years ago and ahead of this trip. And when Sean graduated, and just seeing how it's grown over these years has been tremendous. And so it's the process of looking at how a tree really grows and what's important with that, of those roots getting deeper, of those roots really settling and getting into the ground, that tap root going down to find that, where's that source of water and nutrients that'll continue to feed it. And those roots secure it, right? Those roots help keep it firm. If you've ever seen pictures of trees that have fallen over from a storm or whatnot, oftentimes what you see is a very shallow root system, that is not grown deep, and even some really old trees that have been there for many years and many decades. that get toppled. You see oftentimes the tree, those roots stay right there at the surface. So again, it's that picture and that image of always becoming more, of always growing deeper. And I was reading this devotional this morning. We're doing this devotional with our church body, and what it talked about this morning was really all about how the roots get tilled. The roots, the vine dresser digs at the roots, and really tills out the soil and pulls out the rocks and all those things, and all in an effort to help stimulate growth, to help stimulate more. And folks, that's what this is all about with us, right? This is all about what this life with God is, and with each one of us. It's all about continuing to get at those roots and continuing to dig deeper and tilling it and pulling the crap out of the way, all the things that get in the way of growth, to stimulate more growth, right? And that's what God is after in each one of us. It's this continued process, the continued process of becoming and growing. And one of the things that really stuck out to me this week, and I was really writing this chapter all about choosing healing, choosing restoration, right? And one of the categories that is a very big in what I've learned to teach, and what has been a big part of my restoration, is understanding wounding, and understanding the vows and agreements and messages that come with wounding, because we are all wounded in some form or fashion. Not just one time either, friends. Multiple times over the course of our life, even into adulthood. Those wounds still can happen. Those wounds can still manifest, whether it's in a hail of projectiles, or it's just a little single volley at a time of arrows that really just pierce our hearts in different ways. So we have to be able to deal with that. And part of what Jesus is after going over those wounded places in our hearts and bringing healing and restoration to there. And bringing that healing and restoration is where you can invite Jesus in more, where you're tilled out more, where that place is now just dug out, just rooted out, so that now you can become more, right? When you finally receive the healing in that place. And Pastor Rick Warren kind of set that picture in the Purpose-Driven Life of Christ establishing a beachhead when you first surrender to Jesus, and now it's this continued daily process of now surrendering more and more of that beach, of that island, or wherever that is. Just think of the Battle of Iwo Jima, for instance. How they had to establish a beachhead first before they could spread and begin to take more of the island. But that's what Jesus is after in us, right? He's after that restoration. He's after healing. And friends, what I've seen all too often, probably more often than I'd care to imagine, and this was even a thing for me very early on, when the idea of healing, or even father wounds, became this kind of prevalent thing that I started to know about. It was something that I didn't want to address. I didn't think I was wounded in any strange capacity. I didn't know how to process that, and it took some serious prayer and contemplation and guidance to really get to that point for me in my life. And what I've heard oftentimes is men say, and men and women have said this, that they just don't feel like they've ever been wounded. That I'm just not that wounded guy, right? And to deny that is a part or a significant place in your life, a significant category, is denying a very important aspect. And friends, and I just want to, there's a couple quotes I want to read here that just really came to mind as I was writing this out this week. One is just really knowing and recognizing that denying our wounding is something that we can't do, that it's something that's very dangerous for us in our lives. And this comes from the Sacred Romance, when it says, "We cannot deny the arrows that have struck us all, sometimes arriving in a hail of projectiles that blocked out the sun, and other times descending in a more subtle flight that not only let us know we were wounded years later, and when they festered and when they broke. And so oftentimes that becomes the case, and that ended up becoming my case, where it wasn't until years later that I really could put a name and really realize what that was. So it's important to just know that we have to embrace the messiness of what this life with God is, that we can't just set it aside and think, no, this isn't, that's not mine, that's not my category. I'm not wounded, I haven't been hurt. So when you deny that place, you are pretty much denying Jesus access to significant places of your heart that you really need to be able to let him into, knowing that this is a messy life. Mike Yaconelli, he wrote in his book Messy Spirituality, I love the title of that book just itself, he says that spirituality is not a formula, it is not a test, it is relationship. Spirituality is not about competency, it is about intimacy. Spirituality is not about perfection, it's about connection. The way of the spiritual life begins where we are now in the mess of our lives, accepting the reality of our broken, flawed lives in the beginning of spirituality, not because the spiritual life will remove our flaws, but because we let go of seeking perfection and instead seek God, the one who is present in the tangleness of our lives. Spirituality is not about being fixed, it is about being present in the mess of our unfixedness. I love that word, unfixedness. So again, healing is so significant, and we're not just it's not just about just trying to fix. There's a difference between fixing and healing, right? If you're trying to fix something, you're just trying to mask it. You're covering it with you're trying to get something to just start working. Think of going to the doctor and just taking medication to mask symptoms and try to be able to function. Healing is really getting at and making new those deeper places, and it's a messy journey. It's a messy thing that has to happen, and if you don't let that happen in your life, friends, you're missing so much, and it prevents that soil from being tilled in your soul, right? It prevents those roots from being allowed to really grow deeper, as Jesus is really trying to get after and restore more and more, and seeking you to restore more and more places in your heart. Think of the parable of this farmer casting seeds, and the soil that fell on the rocky footpath that could not get, or the seeds that fell on the rocky footpath and could not really grow in any way. They just sat there or were trampled over. Seeds that fell on the rocky or in the thorns and thistles, they get it and they start growing, but then they were choked out by all the weeds and the thorns, by the cares of this world, if you will. And all of that, and then you go through, and then finally there's the last of the conditions is the soil that is nurtured, that is full of nutrients, that allows the seeds to just grow and mature and produces a crop that is 100 times more. So that's what God is after in each one of us. Got strange things floating around here, and that's what God is after in each one of us, right? He's after finding those places where he can allow, where we can grow deeper into him, and really because it begins to produce this more abundant crop in us. So I just really wanted to reiterate that this morning, of just really that thought of we're after becoming, right? And in this book I'm reading right now, that from Morgan Snyder of Ransom Heart, called Becoming a King, he really talks about that in his message. And I've been thankful to sit under his teaching when I went out to the intensive 4 years ago. Before I planted that tree, it was actually coming to the event that he spearheaded, and being able to just know that God is after men who can become the kind of men that God can entrust with the care of his kingdom, right? And that's what we're after. God is after us becoming more, so that he can entrust us with more. There's an inheritance that is awaiting each one of us as we step into eternity and then the restoration of all things, right? And but God really is after that has to get after those places, we have to be willing to allow him in. And like Jesus says, I said, behold, I stand at the door and knock. And those who let me, if you let me in, I will come in and dine in him and him with me. But he's waiting. He's waiting for the invitation, friends. You have to be willing to let him in. And that's a significant part of continuing to become the kind of person that God meant when he met you, right? Your original glory, who you were created to be, God is after through Jesus Christ, who is after restoring each one of us. He wants us to become that again. And that's an important thing that we have to be willing to go after in our lives, friends. So I don't want you to lose that. Be willing to step into the messiness of it. Be willing to allow yourself to deal with that pain. You have to. It'll come to the surface. Allow it. Surrender it. Renounce those places of agreement and vows. Really invite Jesus to heal those specific places, right? And allow God to love you in that place, and then begin to forgive those that may have hurt you. Forgive yourself for the way you may have mishandled the way you were hurt or the way you were wounded. If you're unsure about it, ask God. Really talk to God about it. Begin to ask him, where have I been wounded? Where is that place that needs healing in my life? If you've walked through this before, maybe you've addressed this in some form or fashion in your life, I would almost venture that there is more. There's more to uncover, right? Even in my journey in the last few years down the road, there's been additional wounds that I've uncovered, additional messages and agreements that I've made that I wasn't aware of before. But now that I have this category, I can go after that. I can really invite Jesus into that and seek healing in those places. And that's what I want to urge you, friends, to be able to do as well. So that's really it. That's really what I wanted to share this week. So I pray that this was just offered some help, some encouragement for you, friends. And with that, I appreciate you just chiming in, just being able to listen. And I'm so thankful just to be able to be here and share these messages with you week after week. And we'll keep it going as long as God keeps me here. So again, I pray that you guys have a wonderful weekend and a great start to your week next week. And just remember that God is always after you becoming more rooted in him. And so seek after that in your lives, friends. So until next time, friends, I will see you then. So take care and God bless.